Imagine walking through the British countryside. You might picture rolling green hills, ancient woodlands, and maybe, if you're lucky, a glimpse of one of its most iconic residents, the European badger. With their distinctive black and white stripes, these shy, nocturnal creatures have been a part of this landscape for thousands of years. But for over a decade, a shadow has loomed over them. Since 2013, a government-led cull has resulted in the deaths of over 250,000 badgers. The reason? To stop the spread of a devastating disease in cattle, bovine tuberculosis, or BTB. But here's the unsettling part. Despite this massive cull, bovine TB is still a major, and in some areas, growing problem. So, what is really going on? Why are hundreds of thousands of badgers being killed? And is it even working? Today, we're diving deep into the controversial world of the UK's badger cull. To understand this story, we first need to understand the disease at its heart. Bovine tuberculosis is a bacterial infection that primarily affects cattle. It's a serious issue for farmers, causing chronic illness in their herds, leading to significant economic losses and emotional distress. When a cow tests positive for BTB, it must be culled, and the entire farm is placed under strict movement restrictions, sometimes for years. The financial and personal toll on farming families is immense. The government spends over £100 million a year on BTB control measures. So, where do badgers fit into this picture? Badgers are one of the few other species in the UK that can also carry and transmit the BTB bacteria. They can become infected and, in theory, pass the disease back to cattle, creating a wildlife reservoir for the infection. This connection, this potential link between badgers and cattle, is the entire justification for the cull. The logic is simple. Reduce the badger population and you reduce the chances of them transmitting the disease to livestock. The policy of widespread, intensive culling began in 2013 into pilot zones, Gloucester and Somerset. The method involves either shooting free-roaming badgers at night, or process known as controlled shooting, or trapping them in cages before they are shot. From those two initial zones, the cull has expanded dramatically. Year after year, new areas across England have been licensed for culling, from Cornwall in the southwest to Cumbria in the north. The numbers are staggering. In 2020 alone, over 38,000 badgers were killed. The cumulative total has now surpassed 250,000. This represents a significant portion of the entire UK badger population, which was estimated to be around 185,000 before the culls began. For many, this is seen as a necessary, if tragic, measure to protect an essential industry and the livelihoods of thousands of farmers. They argue that without tackling the disease in wildlife, they'll never get it under control in cattle. However, the cull has been fiercely opposed from the very beginning. Animal welfare groups, wildlife charities, and a significant portion of the scientific community have raised serious concerns. Firstly, there are the animal welfare issues. Is controlled shooting, often done at night from a distance, truly humane? Studies have shown that a percentage of badgers are not killed instantly and can be left injured, dying slowly and painfully. Protests and direct action by anti-cull activists who patrol cull zones at night to disrupt the shooters have become a common and often tense feature of the countryside during the culling season. But the opposition goes far beyond animal welfare. The core of the debate lies in the science. Does culling badgers actually work to reduce BTB in cattle? This is where things get incredibly complicated. The government's own research, a landmark study called the Randomized Badger Culling Trial, which ran for 10 years before the current policy started, produced very ambiguous results. It found that proactive culling, if done effectively and over a large enough area, could have a modest beneficial effect on BTB rates in cattle. But it also found that reactive culling in response to a local outbreak could actually make the problem worse. This is due to something called the perturbation effect. When a badger social group is disrupted by culling, the surviving badgers can panic and roam further afield than they normally would, potentially spreading the disease to new areas. Critics of the current policy argue that the government cherry-picked the modest beneficial effect from this study while ignoring the serious risks. Many prominent scientists, including some who worked on that original trial, have publicly stated that they do not believe the current cull is an effective or scientifically justified policy. They point out that the main driver of BTB spread is cattle-to-cattle transmission, not badger-to-cattle. Poor biosecurity on farms, inaccurate cattle testing, and the movement of infected but undetected cattle around the country are seen by many as far bigger factors. So, if culling is so controversial and its effectiveness so debated, what are the alternatives? Thankfully, there are several, and the focus is increasingly shifting towards them. The first is vaccination. A vaccine for badgers, called BCG, does exist. It doesn't cure an already infected badger, but it can reduce the severity and progression of the disease, making them less likely to transmit it. For years, volunteer groups have been trapping and vaccinating badgers, a costly and labor-intensive but humane alternative to culling. The challenge has been scaling it up. More promising is the development of a cattle vaccine. For decades, a cattle BTB vaccine has been unavailable for use in the UK because it interferes with the standard skin test used to detect the disease. You couldn't tell a vaccinated cow from an infected one. But science is advancing. A new test, called a DIVA test, has been developed that can differentiate between infected and vaccinated animals. Field trials are underway, and the hope that an effective cattle vaccination strategy could be rolled out within the next few years. This could be a genuine game-changer, offering a way to protect cattle directly without having to cull wildlife. Alongside vaccination, there's a huge emphasis on improving biosecurity on farms. This means making it harder for cattle and badgers to come into contact. Simple measures like raising water and feed troughs, installing badger-proof fencing around feed stores and farm buildings, and securing slurry pits can make a big difference. It's about breaking the chain of transmission, improving cattle testing to catch the disease earlier and more accurately, and implementing stricter controls on cattle movements from high-risk areas are also crucial components of a more comprehensive strategy. The focus is shifting from simply managing the wildlife vector to a multi-pronged approach that tackles the disease at every possible point of transmission after more than a decade of culling. The policy is finally beginning to change. In 2021, the government announced its intention to phase out intensive badger culling and move towards a strategy based on vaccination and improved biosecurity. While new cull licenses have continued to be issued, the government has stated that no new licenses will be granted after 2022, with existing ones lasting for a few more years. The tide is turning, but for the hundreds of thousands of badgers already lost, it's too late. The story of the badger cull is a complex and often tragic one. It's a story of a devastating disease, immense pressure on farmers, and a deeply divisive policy that has pitched conservation against agriculture. It's a stark reminder of the difficult choices we face when human activities and wildlife collide. While the future looks more hopeful, with a focus on science-led alternatives like vaccination, the legacy of the last decade will leave a permanent mark on the British countryside and on one of its most beloved and beleaguered native animals. Thank you for watching. What are your thoughts on this complex issue? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this video informative, please give it a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world around us.